A very good evening. It's the 28th of March 2023. Welcome to the Primetime News here on TV1. For the News First team, I'm Sanitha Senanayaka. Before we take a look at the stories that we've got for you this evening in detail, let's take a look at the headlines.
Petroleum trade unions go on strike. Fuel distribution from Kolonnawa hampered. Finance Minister sends charge sheet to Public Utilities Chief. Demands reasons to not terminate service within 7 days.
මම මේ චෝදනාවලට බය නැහැ. මම මේ චෝදනා එනකම් බලන් හිටියේ. මේ චෝදනාවට මම උත්තර දීලා තියෙනවා. මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඡන්දයෙන් මාව අයින් කිරීමේ විශාල හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා. මම අපි දන්නවා කොහොමද පාර්ලිමේන්තුව වැඩ කරන්නේ කියලා. ඒ හින්දා මට කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ.
Oil pipeline from India to Trincomalee. President says discussions underway. Amnesty International says Sri Lanka was one of the many countries that disrupted right to protest. Former COPE chairman alleges privatization is done to secure commissions.
Sri Lankan airline එක ලංකාවේ මුලින්ම පෞද්ගලීකරණය කෙරුවා. ඒ වෙලාවෙත් කොමිස් මුදලක් ගියා. පෞද්ගලීකරණය රජයට ගත්තා. ඒ වෙලාවෙත් කොමිස් මුදලක් ආවා.
Israel protests. Prime Minister Netanyahu delays legal reforms after day of strikes.
On to those stories in detail. Petroleum joint trade unions decided to suspend operations from Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals Limited. The trade union action against the privatization of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation or CPC led to an all-out strike on Tuesday evening. Minister Kanchana Wijesekara has instructed the head of CPC and CPSTL to take necessary disciplinary steps against trade unions disrupting the distribution process.
The Petroleum Trade Union Collective launched a Satyagraha campaign on Monday opposite the Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals Limited in Kolonnawa against attempts to privatize the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. Following a meeting on Tuesday morning, it was converted to a strike. Therefore, many fuel bouses that visited the CPSTL were turned back. Several police teams were deployed to Kolonnawa as well.
At noon, all of the employees attended a meeting and decided to go for a strike. All employees decided to disrupt the fuel distribution process and stepped away from their duties. Fuel distribution has been disrupted and we will continue with this strike. We hope the authorities will pay heed to this strike. The distribution of fuel from all petroleum storage facilities including Kolonnawa, Muthurajavela and Sapugaskanda remains suspended. We hope we will be called for talks with the ministry or the President's office to solve the issues. If multinational companies have been allowed to enter the Sri Lankan fuel market and if that is to reduce the fuel price in the country, we demand the minister to disclose how the price drop will take place after those companies start operations. As the SLPP, we cannot be silent over this matter. We understand that Ranil Wickremesinghe's policy is to sell the assets. However, the SLPP manifesto does not mention any such thing.
This was the response by Minister Kanchana Wijesekara. Court.
I have instructed Chairman of the CPC and CPSTL to take necessary disciplinary steps to consider termination of employment and any legal steps necessary against trade union activists or employees that are disrupting the distribution of fuel, disrupting the work of other employees, or is acting in violation of the Essential Services Order.
Unquote.
What is going on at the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation?
On Monday, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara presented a cabinet paper to allow 3 foreign companies to enter Sri Lanka's fuel retail market, and it was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. Cabinet decided to award licenses to Sinopec, United Petroleum Australia and RM Parks USA in collaboration with Shell PLC to enter the fuel market.
What opportunities will be awarded to these companies?
According to a statement published by the Ministry of Power and Energy calling for expressions of interest, the selected firms will be given an opportunity to import, export, supply, sell and distribute petroleum products in the country. The selected firms can engage in business by using the filling stations operated by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and filling stations that they expect to open in the future. In addition, these firms can utilize the infrastructure facilities at Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals Limited by paying a fee. Notably, as per the statement published by the Ministry of Power and Energy, upon commencing operations, these firms will be able to open new filling stations and storage facilities. According to a tweet from Minister Kanchana Wijesekara, the three firms will be allocated 150 dealer-operated filling stations each, which are currently operated by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. He added that they will be granted a license to operate for 20 years to import, store, distribute and sell petroleum products in Sri Lanka. Lanka IOC is also preparing to open 34 new filling stations in Sri Lanka in March. However, trade unions warn that the lack of transparency in these deals raise serious concerns.
The CPC owns 334 filling stations and the rest are dealer-operated filling stations. That makes a total of 1,100 filling stations. 110 filling stations were given to IOC and that figure spikes to 225. The CPC made profits in millions by selling those 1,100 filling stations. We have not seen any open tender process. The selection process has not been disclosed. The Ministry Secretary has assured the court of transparency. However, no one is aware of this process. No matter what company comes forward, they will be used to launder the $18 billion that was looted from the country.
Former COPE chairman Professor Charita Herath alleged that attempts to privatize assets under the IMF proposals is an attempt to engage in unlawful act.
මේ ඇමතිවරුන්ට අර රජ මගුල් IMF එකේ report එකේ තියෙනවා state owned enterprises.
This is in fact something good for the ministers. The IMF report says that the restructuring of government institutions is necessary. Now they are saying that decision will be made. Sri Lankan Airline was first privatized. Even then a commission was given. It was once again taken back to the government and another commission expense was incurred. Now they are attempting to sell it or to privatize it. We need a better public discourse in regard to restructuring of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the Ceylon Electricity Board. This cannot be allowed simply because a small report was handed over to the President and the ministers, especially when the President is a successive President. This must go into a democratic debate. It is a right of the government to sell the shares of government institutions. However, that does not mean that the government can do so on the whims of successive president and his advisors. This country is not represented by the president and those around him. We have witnessed what has happened to leaders who thought that they were the country themselves. They were shunned by the society. We saw such acts during the 70s and 77 governments. In the end, the entire country will fall into an even bigger crisis. It is a decision of the country whether foreign companies will be allowed to invest in the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation or not. There is no issue there. However, the assumption that few people in the cabinet with so-called great minds can make these decisions alone is wrong.
කූ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. හැබැයි ඒක එන්න දෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක ඔය වගේ තමන්ම තනියෙන් සියල්ල හොයාගත්ත ආක්‍රිමිඩිස්ලාගේ කැබිනට් එකක් හදාගෙන තනියෙන් මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ විසඳන්න පුළුවන් කියලා හිතන එක වැරදි.
State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siambalapitiya met with trade unions.
When it comes to the restructuring of state-owned enterprises, people assume that everything is sold. But this is not the case. There are many other methods of restructuring. It can be that the enterprise is brought under one institution or even divided into multiple. Many methods can be used depending on different institutions. To protect government property, we have an expense of 300 to 400 billion rupees annually. The expense for education is 500 to 600 billion. We spend 300 to 400 billion rupees on protecting government property. We are still made to ask ourselves if we are protecting government property. When we try to bring ourselves up from a crisis that we have created, we do not believe that anyone has the right to reverse this. We believe that we must find solutions to the problems that we have made. If we are attempting to take forward enterprises by using government intervention limitlessly, we would be driven to an even bigger crisis.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that there is an ongoing discussion on bringing an oil pipeline from India to Trincomalee and emphasized the importance of cooperation with South India in moving towards renewable energy. President Ranil Wickremesinghe was meeting with investors who attended the Sri Lanka Green Energy Summit at the President's office and noted that Trincomalee has been identified as a potential port for green hydrogen due to its proximity to the north.
Former Minister Parale Champika Ranawaka says that action should be taken against those who disregarded the warnings issued by the International Monetary Fund in March 2020.
2019 රටේ ජනාධිපති අගමැති මුදල් ඇමති කියන මේ තුන්දෙනාට
In 2019, the President, Prime Minister and Finance Minister of the country did not have any formal education. I'm not insulting them, but they weren't well educated. So the Secretary to the President took all the principal decisions. The International Monetary Fund informed the Central Bank and the President's Secretary in a letter on the 7th of March 2020 that our debt is not sustainable and warned that Sri Lanka will go into crisis and bankruptcy very soon. Ignoring the warning is a serious crime. It was the worst crime committed by officials in this country after independence. PB Jayasundara is one of the main respondents of this crime. If Pujit Jayasundara was sued for not acting after being warned of the Easter attack, PB Jayasundara should be sued for 1 million such cases, especially for disregarding this warning. Also, the tax relief that was implemented in December to appease some businessmen. Who was behind it? The Viatmaga, the infamous businessman who sat in the row in front of the Viatmaga, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of the Ministry of Finance and the President's Secretary who led the Treasury should be responsible for the tax concessions that were given without any background study. Of the $12 billion Indrajit Kumaraswamy secured, he saved 7.2 billion before leaving. However, 5.2 billion was wasted, keeping the dollar at 198 rupees. This is an economic crime. The uneducated president and the uneducated prime minister did not take this decision. The decision taken by a group of officials of the central bank considered to be educated, and the country had to suffer the consequences.
සුදු කරපටි අපරාධයක්. එතකොට ඒක කලේ අර නූගත් අගමැතිවත් නූගත් ජනාධිපතිවත් නූගත් මුදල් ඇමතිවත් නෙවෙයි. මේ උගත්යයි සම්මත මහ බැංකුවේ නිලධාරීන් පිරිසක් ගත්ත තීරණයක්. ඒකෙන් බැටකන්න උනේ අපේ රටට.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as the Finance Minister, has informed the Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka to make representations in respect of his proposed removal within 7 days. The letter notes that if PUCSL Chief Janaka Ratnayaka fails to respond to the charges within the stipulated time frame, he would be removed in terms of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka Act. The charges are: as a member and chairman of PUCSL, caused the Commission to institute an application in the Court of Appeal contrary to the PUCSL Act. The Court of Appeal has made an affirmative finding against the PUCSL chief in the exercise of functions and conduct as a member and chairman of PUCSL. Conflict of interest created due to the PUCSL Chairman's association with Trillium Property Management and Services contrary to the Public Utilities Commission Act, publicly opposing the request for tariff revision by the CEB without following due process, making statements targeting the Minister of Power and Energy having acted in a manner which affects the ability to exercise, perform and discharge the powers and duties under the PUCSL Act. The Public Utilities Commission chairman responded to these allegations.
නඩුවක් ගොනු කරා මීට මාස දෙකකට විතර කලින් ඒ විභාග කාලය තුල
2 months ago, we filed a case in court to prevent them from imposing power cuts during examination periods. Now they are telling that the Commission is at fault for filing that petition in court. That is the first allegation against me. I myself was never a party for this case, but the PUCSL was a party in this case. The second allegation against me is that I acted arbitrarily by acting beyond the powers vested on me. The third allegation is that I am distributing and selling power from a hotel I own at number 210 Torrington Avenue. This is a false allegation. The fourth allegation is that I oppose the increasing of the electricity tariff. That is also not true. I didn't oppose to the increasing of electricity tariffs. Before I went abroad on the 13th of February, I approved the increasing of electricity tariffs by 35%. We allowed this increase because even we understood that this is a fair request made in order to recover from this crisis. And the fifth and the final allegation is that I criticized the minister. Actually, it was the minister who started criticizing me like a toddler. He accused me of helping the former president, and he is the one who started telling everyone that they are going to fire me. All I did was respond to the accusations leveled by him against me. I am not afraid of these baseless accusations. I was actually waiting for this charge sheet. I have answered these allegations before. go. But I know that I can be removed by obtaining a majority vote in the parliament. You all know how the parliament of this country works. I have no issue about that. Only a majority exceeding 113 votes in the parliament can remove me. I know that they will have this vote in the near future. Until then, I will continue my service for this commission.
The South Asia regional launch of the Amnesty International Global Annual Report for the year 2022 and 2023 took place in Colombo today. Amnesty International's annual report 2022 highlights double standards throughout the world on human rights and the failure of the international community to unite around consistently applied human rights and universal values.
Today we're here in Colombo where the South Asia regional launch of the Amnesty International Global Annual Report 2023 will be taking place. The keynote speaker for today is the Senior Director, Dipros Muchena, who will be giving his thoughts on the report and also will be part of the launch.
Human rights came under attack. We saw repression of the most calculated order. And this repression did not pick and choose where it happened, because we saw global protest movement being faced with brute force, with killings, with mass arrests, and with all manner of human rights violations, not least in this country, in this region, and in this continent. How to use resources of the state to repress rights, and how to use denial of protection of human rights to undermine the very spirit of human rights. This happened in Ethiopia, this happened in Myanmar, this happened in Sri Lanka, this happened in Afghanistan, this happened in India. So around the world, repression and assault of the protest movement became commonplace. This year, Amnesty launched a global right to protest initiative, because we really believe that for freedoms to thrive, people should be given an opportunity to protest. In Sri Lanka, police use live ammunition, use tear gas, water cannons against largely peaceful protests. We're calling upon governments, in particular governments of South Asia, to stop using the pretext to repress dissent, to prevent discussions of human rights in countries, to stop the practice of deploying legislation not even needed as a way of demobilizing protest movement and accountability movement that has emerged in the last couple of years. We believe that it is important at this particular time that a new leadership imagination emerges in the global south to deal with the many of the global crises that our report mentions. It is one thing to call for solidarity when our allies are under attack. What we've been disappointed with is countries completely demobilizing when they need to be mobilizing for human rights protection. And this is something that is taking place in particular in this region.
Headed by Tyagiruwan Patirana, joined by Swastika Arulingam and Ambika Satkunanathan, a panel discussion was held highlighting the Aragalaya and the unjust forces used against the peaceful protesters. Given the current economic crisis and human rights situation in Sri Lanka, Dipros Muchena, Senior Director for Human Rights Impact at Amnesty International, aims to use his presence to highlight and stress on the urgent need to protect and promote the rights of the island's 22 million people.
We are pleased to be launching the annual report here in Sri Lanka on behalf of the movement of Amnesty International across the world. The right to protest was severely attacked from Cape to Cairo, from Cairo to Colombo, and that it is a reminder now that governments exist to protect the rights of people to express themselves, and enacting legislation and deploying legislation, including use of force, does not diminish the human spirit to fight for rights. And therefore it's important at this particular moment that Sri Lankans join the rest of the world in demanding rights, in protecting rights, and in calling out double standards so that we can become a more fairer and just world.
Yamini Mishra, Regional Director for South Asia at Amnesty International, had this to say.
Since last year, we have seen with great awe the way people in Sri Lanka have protested, and in fact, in different parts of the world, I remember member colleagues watching the protest live and feeling motivated by what public action can do. It was worrying though to note that the government clamped down on the protesters, sometimes by unjustified use of force. We are well aware of the fact that there were prolonged detentions, people were charged with anti-terrorism laws, there was use of water cannons, etc., which would fall outside the purview of the use of such measures as justified in the international human rights law. One big request for us to government of Sri Lanka would be to stop the clampdown on peaceful protests, which I think is essential to any democracy.
Ambika Satkunanathan spoke on the importance of the Amnesty International's report.
So I think that the Amnesty's report is important because it is a holistic report in the sense that it connects the importance of different kinds of rights and also shines the light on a very important right, which is the right to dissent, because it is only, and the freedom of expression, because it's only by doing this that you can hold the state accountable and ensure that your rights and the rights of others are protected.
A coalition of leading South African human rights groups have questioned their government's invitation to Sri Lankan individuals with links to alleged war crimes for a study tour on reconciliation and transitional justice. This was according to a report by the International Truth and Justice Project, Sri Lanka.
According to the letter drafted by the South African human rights groups, the Sri Lankan Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri and the Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms, Minister Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, had arrived on a working visit to South Africa at the invitation of South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. The letter emphasized that the purpose of the visit, according to the press statement, was to learn that the South African experience in regard to the establishment of and work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, to promote reconciliation in Sri Lanka. The human rights groups allege that the invitation to the Sri Lankan officials by the government of South Africa is concerning in view of allegations of ongoing human rights violations, the suppression of civil society in Sri Lanka, and a failure by the Sri Lankan government to ensure criminal accountability for gross human rights violations perpetrated during the 1983 to 2009 civil war.
3 applications filed with the Court of Appeal against State Minister Sanath Nishantha accusing him of committing contempt of court will be taken up for examination on the 27th of June.
The 3 petitions were called up in the presence of Appeal Court President Nisanka Bandulu Karunaratne and Justice A. Marika. State Minister Sanath Nishantha, who was named as a respondent, was present in court, and the Deputy Solicitor General Lakmini Girihagama informed the court that the government analyst's report on the video footage containing the comments made by the respondent have been directed to the court. President's counsel Romesh De Silva and other counsel appearing for the petitioners requested the court to declare a date for the examination of the petitions. Accordingly, the court declared the 27th of June as the date for the examination of the petitions. The Judicial Officers Association, Attorney Vijita Kumara and Attorney Priyalal Sirisena had filed the 3 petitions.
SLPP MP Rohitabe Gunawardena said that the SLPP is pleased with its decision to elect Ranil Wickremesinghe as president.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa ජනාධිපතිතුමාව හැදුවේ අපේ පක්ෂය.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa created this party. The initiative to bring in Ranil Wickremesinghe as president was also taken by the SLPP. We are pleased with the decisions we have made. We can definitely say so.
ඒ ගත්තු තීන්දුව හොඳ තීන්දුවක් කියලා අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන්.
The SLPP is dancing to the tunes of Ranil Wickremesinghe. He makes all the decisions for those at the Nelum Mawatha. I would like to extend my gratitude to Ranil Wickremesinghe. We were with him for 20 years. He has accomplished something that he failed to do so in the past. He is making the same group that condemned the IMF praise it. He made the same group that condemned privatization speak of the benefits of it. He made the same people that called him the central bank thief now praise him as if there is no better leader. Those who brought Gotabaya into power are now regretting it. This transformation itself is a victory for him. I am thankful for that.
ගෙන තිබ්බේ කියලා කියවනවා. ඉතින් ඒ පරිවර්තනය කරපු එකම තුමාගේ විශිෂ්ට ජයග්‍රහණයක්. මම ඒකට ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා.
The Sakvala and Husma programs, spearheaded by opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, is continuing, and it was re-emphasized by a statement issued to review the previous programs.
24 Sakpala programs were implemented to create smart classrooms for students by donating the latest PCs and equipment. 18.9 million rupees were spent under the Sakpala program to donate the equipment to schools. 70 buses were donated to schools across the country in line with the Sakpala program at a cost of 339.2 million rupees. The Vipaksha in Husmak program was carried out to provide relief to the people affected by the medicine shortage. Under this program, the distribution of medicine and equipment to hospitals was done under the leadership of the opposition leader. So far, medicine and medical equipment worth 172 million rupees has been distributed to more than 50 hospitals across the island.
The President's Media Division said that 3.7 million applications were received from 340 divisional secretariat divisions throughout the island for welfare benefit payments. The program to identify those eligible for welfare benefit payments has completed the information verification for over 2.2 million applications received during the ongoing survey and verification process. The President's Media Division said that Samana Ekanayaka, the Secretary to the President, has instructed the officers to accelerate the eligibility verification process. As the information survey work is set to conclude on the 31st of March, the government urges applicants to provide accurate data to the officials conducting the survey with utmost urgency.
Veteran vocalist and musician Sangeet Nipun, Professor Sanath Nandasiri, has passed away at the age of 81.
Sanath Nandasiri was born on the 15th of February 1942 in Gotatuwa, Kolonnava, and was the third in a family of 5 siblings. He attended 2 schools as an adolescent, Gotatuwa Mahavidyalaya and St. Matthew's College, Dematagoda. Sanath Nandasiri, who won the hearts of Sri Lankan music lovers, entered the government music school in 1969 as a teacher. He produced a number of scores for various directors and thereafter was recognized as a music director, which led to a number of awards presented to him. Sanath Nandasiri was a guru for thousands of young musicians in Sri Lanka, and in 1993 he was bestowed with the Kalashuri title. In 1994 he completed his postgraduate program at the Batkande University of Arts and passed with a first-class recognition and was given the Sangeet Nipun honour. In 1995, Sanath Nandasiri became Sri Lanka's first ever professional in music after being awarded many state awards for his contributions to the local music industry. Following the demise of the late Pandit Amaradeva, Sangeet Nipun Sanath Nandasiri served as a Chancellor of the University of Visual and Performing Arts. The late Emeritus Professor Sangeet Nipun Sanath Nandasiri passed away at his residence on Tuesday morning following an illness. The final rites will take place at 5 p.m. on Saturday, the 1st of April at the Boralla Public Cemetery. Until then, the remains will be placed at his Embulenia residence. Late Emeritus Professor Sangeet Nipun Sanath Nandasiri, you will be missed.
Kamul sudumeli paatapa detalai band avasangamanat sunduri matanokiya madiya.
Joseph Michael Pereira, the 17th Speaker of the Sri Lankan Parliament, passed away on Tuesday at the age of 82. From 1964 to 1967, he was an elected member of the Jaila Urban Council. From 1976 to 1977, he was an elected member of Parliament to the First National State Assembly. And from 1978 to 1988, he was an elected member of Parliament to the First Parliament of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Until the 17th of August 2015, he served as an MP, Minister and Speaker in Parliament.
A webinar on what next for Sri Lanka on the IMF facility took place on Monday.
We are in a situation where we have a dual crisis to battle on. Sovereign debt crisis, balance of payments crisis, without much of buffers. So if we do not discipline ourselves and put things in the right direction with very thin room available for us because of the IMF program, and so we do not have much of headroom to maneuver. So if we don't get things right in this time around, and it is guaranteed that we'll be going back to 2022.
Former Central Bank Deputy Governor Dr. W.A.V.J. Vardhana spoke at the event.
So the most important factor that we have to keep in our mind is our objective is not to get the IMF facility, nor is it to have this balance in the macroeconomy. Our final objective is to enhance the economic growth, create prosperity for Sri Lankans, and as the President has already pronounced, to make Sri Lanka a rich country by year 2048, and what action we have to take in order to attain that goal. The IMF extended fund facility will simply help us to reach that goal. It's necessary, but it's not a sufficient element for us to reach our final goal of creating prosperity for all the Sri Lankans.
Professor Lakshman R. Vatavala, the founder president of CMA, commented on the IMF program as well.
I think all sectors have to be efficient. They have to work to a timetable. They need to give the output. It's not only the what is mentioned in the EFF, because education is something very important. Then also the required sort of streams, if it is on the finance area, the high finance, all those things would come in order that we will be able to go into the new economy and also compete with the global people. So I think every sector will have to be transformed if Sri Lanka is really to make a comeback.
The webinar on What Next for Sri Lanka on the IMF facility was organized by CMA Sri Lanka. Under pressure from massive protests, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday paused his plan to overhaul Israel's judiciary.
The plans by Netanyahu's nationalist religious coalition to hand control over judicial appointments to the executive while giving parliament the power to overturn Supreme Court rulings has ignited one of the biggest internal crises in Israeli history. As per a report, the judicial overhaul would give the executive control over appointing judges to the Supreme Court. It would also allow the government to override court rulings on the basis of a simple parliamentary majority. Netanyahu's coalition allies are dominated by religious and nationalist hardliners who oppose Palestinian statehood and have close ties to the West Bank settlement movement. A weaker court system would clear the way for more aggressive settlement construction and even annexation of West Bank lands. The pause Netanyahu declared could help ease the tensions and buy him some time to find a compromise. But it also runs the risk of angering his far-right coalition partners, potentially threatening the stability of his government and risking the possibility of new elections.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Primetime News here on TV1. For the News First team, I've been Senita Senanayaka. Take care and stay safe.